The wind off the Petaquamscut River was cold, carrying the scent of salt and turned earth. Joshua stood by the fresh mound of dirt. His shovel still leaned against a nearby oak. Sarah was gone, and with her, the only bridge he had left to a world of peace. Behind him, the small gathering of Teft's and Sarah's kin began to drift back toward the timber-framed cabin. But Joshua remained, his hands calloused and stained with the soil that now held his wife. He didn't look at the others. He looked toward the treeline, where the shadows of the great swamp loomed, a place that was once a sanctuary and was now a fortress of his own simmering rage. The training, the weeks that followed were not filled with the sounds of harvest, but with the sharp crack of flintlocks and the heavy thud of axes against practice posts. Joshua became a ghost in his own home. He moved with a predatory efficiency, teaching Sarah's brothers and his own kin how to move through the brush without snapping a twig, and how to lead a target through the sights of a musket. The colonists see a wilderness to be conquered. Joshua barked at a young cousin who had stumbled during a drill. The Indians see a mother to be defended. If you want Peter to keep this land, you must learn to see both and fear neither. He was training them for a war he felt in his bones. He saw the way the authorities in Newport and Providence looked at men like him, men who had crossed the line, lived among the tribes, and dared to find humanity in the heathen. He knew the peace was a thin crust of ice over a deep, dark lake. Samuel and Peter. While Joshua's world was made of lead and gunpowder, Samuel Teft carved out a world of light for the boy left in the wake of the storm. Samuel found Peter sitting by the hearth, drawing shapes in the ash with a stick. The boy had his mother's eyes, dark, perceptive, and heavy with a confusion he couldn't yet name. Joshua would pass through the room like a winter draft, barely glancing at the child, his mind already miles away in the war camps. "Look here, Peter," Samuel said softly, kneeling beside him. He pulled a small piece of cedar from his pocket, carved into the shape of a hawk. "Your father he is guarding the gate, but I am here to show you what's inside the walls." Samuel took the boy to the fields, teaching him the names of the medicinal herbs Sarah had loved. He told him stories of the Teft ancestors, weaving them together with stories of the land they now trod. Under Samuel's care, Peter learned that land wasn't just something to die for, it was something to live with. One evening, as the sun dipped low, painting the Narragansett sky in bruised purples and golds, Samuel looked up to see Joshua watching them from the edge of the woods. Joshua's face was a mask of grief, his musket slung over his shoulder. For a moment, the anger softened. He saw his brother's hand on his son's shoulder and knew that while he prepared Peter for the end of the world, Samuel was preparing him for the beginning of a new one. Joshua didn't join them. He turned back into the shadows of the trees, the weight of the coming conflict settling over him like a shroud, leaving Peter in the warm, steady glow of Samuel's lantern. The air in the Narragansett Basin had turned brittle with the coming frost of 1675. But the chill in the Teft cabin came from the silence between brothers. On the packed dirt floor, Mary Teft moved with a frantic, quiet energy, wrapping dried corn and salt pork into heavy linen. Her daughters, Tabitha and young Mary, worked beside her, their eyes wide and reflecting the orange flicker of the hearth. They were preparing for the long trek toward the ferries that would take them across the water to the safety of Portsmouth. The parting. John Teft stood by the heavy oak door, his hand resting on the latch. He looked older than he had a month ago, the weight of his family's survival pressing hard against his shoulders. "Joshua," John said, his voice a low rumble that barely carried over the wind whistling through the eaves. "The militia from the north. They aren't coming to talk. They're coming to burn. Come to the island. Come back to the town where you were a freeman." Joshua didn't look up. He was seated in the shadows, methodically checking the flint of his musket. His face was a mask of cold stone. Since Sarah's burial, the light of the English world had gone out for him. "I have already buried my heart in this soil, Father," Joshua replied, his voice devoid of emotion. "Sarah's people are my people now. If the colonies want this land, they'll have to take it from the red earth I'm standing on." Samuel's promise. In the corner, Samuel held young Peter. The boy was 3 years old now, clenching a small wooden toy, the hawk Samuel had carved for him. Peter didn't understand the politics of the king or the sachems, but he knew his father's face looked like a storm cloud. Samuel walked over to Joshua and placed a firm hand on his brother's shoulder. Joshua stiffened but didn't pull away. "I will keep him safe, Josh," Samuel whispered, loud enough only for the two of them. "In Portsmouth, he'll have a roof and a name. He'll know who his mother was, and he'll know his father was a man who stood his ground." Joshua finally looked up, his eyes glassy for a fleeting second as they landed on his son. He reached out, his rough, blackened thumb grazing Peter's cheek. "Don't let him forget the woods, Sam," Joshua said. "Don't let them turn him into a man who only sees walls." The departure. The wagons creaked as they rolled out of the yard. John led the small party, his eyes fixed on the horizon, toward the safety of Aquidneck Island. Mary and the girls huddled together, while Samuel sat in the back of the cart, Peter balanced on his lap. The boy looked back over the tailgate, watching the small cabin shrink into the vast, dark expanse of the Narragansett woods. Standing at the edge of the clearing was a lone figure, musket in hand, flanked by 3 Narragansett warriors who had emerged like shadows from the treeline. Joshua didn't wave. He simply watched until the wagon disappeared into the gray mist of the morning. As the sound of the wheels faded, he turned his back on the English road and walked deep into the heart of the great swamp, where the war was waiting for him. Mary took out her journal from the old Hope chest, and with tears streaming down her face, she began to write.
"In cedar swamps where silence ruled, a family breaks by hard choices schooled. The wagon groans with food and fright, fleeing the coming crimson night. John takes the reins with weary hand, leaving the cleared, beloved land. Mary beside him whispers cease, seeking a precarious northern peace. Tabitha and young Mary, bundled tight, watching the farm shrink out of sight. Samuel holds the youngest, small and dear. Peter who clenches a toy, not yet showing fear. They turn their backs on the smoking hearth, driven by survival from this ground. But by the cabin, looking back, one figure walks a darker track. Joshua stands, with musket bold, a story of loyalty, tragic and cold, with Narragansett brothers by his side, with nowhere left on earth to hide. One looks to the ferry, one to the fight, divided by history, divided by light. The cart rolls on through the misty gray, while Joshua turns and walks away, into the swamp where the drums are low, into the war where only he must go.